welcome to the What They Say podcast, the influencer marketing podcast powered by Pretty Green that gives you all the inside goss and intel that you could possibly need around the creator economy. We're going from everything to do with influencers themselves and their day in, day out to brands and agencies navigating the space. And today I'm thrilled to have with us Vicky McGee.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome to the podcast. I've got a bio and I always read it out in front of the guests, so
Okay.
Feel free to blush, but also correct me if I'm really wrong.
Okay.
But you've got a huge range of experience over the past 5 years working in a variety of roles, from talent management yourself to campaign management to also being somewhat of an influencer, I would say, on the side.
Yeah.
But we really want to deep dive into all those different areas because I think you've got some really great, valuable insight into each of them. And we also want to focus on content houses.
Yes.
But we'll get onto that in a
We'll
moment.
get onto that.
We'll get onto that in a moment. But how are you?
Yes, good, thank you.
Good. Did you have far to come?
No, not far at all. Well, it's an hour. For me, not that bad.
Not too bad.
Commuter, over here. I'm used to it.
Seasoned commuter on the train. Vicky, obviously you've done so much in this space that we really wanted to delve into the different sort of facets of that. So you've gone agency side, you've gone brand side, you've created content yourself, and you've also worked with influencers in the form of a content house. Could you sort of tell us a bit about your experience over the years, and then we can get into each of those?
Yeah, so I kind of started in the space and it was quite a new space, I would say. We had like kind of the Instagram, YouTube influencers, and I was at uni and I basically was interested in the space and just kind of started my own profile myself on Instagram. And whenever people ask me like kind of how did you get into the space, that's pretty much how I did it. So it was being on Instagram that I then built friendships through Instagram and through like influencers I knew. And then one day I was literally like at a girls' brunch with loads of influencers, and someone said to me like, does anyone know anyone that wants to get into influencer marketing? And I was like, I do. And it kind of started from there. And then I just was the only person that kind of interviewed for that job at the time. I worked as an influencer marketing exec at an agency, and then just kind of built my career from there. Jumped from different agencies at the start and then went in-house because it seemed like a really interesting opportunity.
Is that very different if you've worked in agency to then
Yes.
go in-house? What's that like? Because obviously from an agency side, you're looking after a variety of different brands.
Yeah.
Probably multiple different hats doing different things. But when you're brand side, how's that?
I think you're still doing multiple different hats, but it's more within the sense of, I think influencer marketing has kind of grown so much. So we've got like content creators for social, we've got influencers, we've got affiliates, we've got UGC creators. Like there still is a lot of hats that you do in-house at a brand, but I think you have a lot more. I know agencies, we also feel like we have a lot to do and we have a lot that we're scrutinized for, but I think in-house, you've also got that. So a lot of in-house, especially if you're looking at like kind of scale up, start up companies, they're really hitting on that kind of ROI. And where is my ROI in influence marketing? If not, I'm cutting back the budget. So that can be quite hard to navigate and to also sell into some brands just brand awareness through influencer marketing, not just affiliate or not just ROI, or conversion driven content or paid media. They don't really understand sometimes that brand awareness will also drive some conversions for you as well. But
the halo effect.
Yeah.
Well, the value of it.
You need to have like an overall kind of influencer marketing strategy. And I think it's ever growing now. And there's so many different sections to influencer marketing, but you have to have all of them almost to really make sure your brand is out there and in people's faces and communicating the right message you want to communicate. So, I mean, I wouldn't say for me there wasn't a lot of difference because I still felt like I was just doing as much workload and there was just as much kind of scrutiny on my head and like looking at what I was doing on a day-to-day basis. But obviously in agency, you get to experience multiple different brands, which is amazing. You get to be across beauty.
It's exciting because of the variety of things.
Yeah, exactly. And you get to see like, okay, what are new, or even find new brands and new products that you love in your personal life just because you've been working on campaigns with them, which I think is so nice.
Yeah. It feels like in whichever role you're doing, there's often been a lot of educating brands or other teams on the value of influencer. So some of them of your roles have been creator facing, others influencer facing. And I've seen you discuss this on LinkedIn. What is the difference for you between influencer and content creator?
Yeah, I think we've got to a position now where there is a lot more of a defined difference. So, for example, influencers, they're creating content for their audience. So it's very much geared to their audience. They know what they're talking about. They know what will work on their platform, and they'll know how to work it for their audience. And so they're creating it for their audience.
So I've seen you on LinkedIn talk about the difference between content creators and influencers. And I think this, for some of our other guests, have also discussed this. And it feels like we've reached a space where there is a lot of more nuance in the economy, creator economy, where we have content creators who are people that have high production value and they really care about the quality of the content they're putting out there that perhaps sticks to a particular niche. Whereas you have, in my mind, and I'm happy for you to prove me wrong, influencers are people that are, in my mind, far more akin to people that perhaps have stumbled into content creation as a result of reality TV or are making content specifically that is slightly more self-gratuitous, or it's more it's less topic driven and more just about them as a person.
Yeah.
So I feel like we're getting there, but a client or a brand has said, we want creators, then we want influencers to do this. And I struggle with it because when I used to be a creator for about 8.5 years, and I would never have heard myself as an influencer because I think it makes you feel as though it felt a bit icky.
Yes.
At that time.
Yeah.
Now I think it's more like common language. But I think when you start talking about it at that level, in my mind, brands are thinking UGC creators, because even if you get down to platform level, I'd argue that then anyone on YouTube is probably a content creator because of the higher quality production or the length of time it takes to make. Would that therefore mean that people on Snap are just influencers? Probably not, because actually there's still content on there that is quite highly produced. So it's really complicated.
Yeah, and there's so many crossovers as well. Like, as I'm saying, I would say, like, you know, you've got the likes of, like, let's take GK Barry, for example. Great at also content creation and great at influencing. So where do we
Where do we draw the line?
Yeah, where do we draw the line? And also, how do we communicate that to brands?
Yeah.
And how do we make them understand that there's all these different things going on and they can do both? And I think also you're getting that crossover with the UGC and influencers as well. Quite a few influencers are moving to UGC, and I think this is because of TikTok. They're realizing, actually, if I'm more raw, I'm more authentic, it's going to do better on a TikTok platform and on the algorithm. So I think there's so many different things, but all these influencers, all these content creators, UGC creators, they're all mixing and they're doing multiple different hats as well at the same time.
And it's like celebrities who tread that influencer line are less inclined to be more content creators, but more like traditional influencers because it's who they are.
Well, I was speaking to quite a big talent recently who I would say is a celebrity, but classifies himself as an influencer, and said to me, like, I would be really, really worried about, like, the industry, where the industry's going, and whether one day my following just goes. And I said, but you're so much more than that. You've got hosting experience, you know, this person's come from I'm a celeb, like, you know, so that, but they all still put themselves in this bracket of, like, I'm a influencer, but you're so much more than that. Yes.
Yeah, significance to their name.
Yeah, and I think, you know, us as brands as well, we can do a job to bring them out of just influencer marketing as well. Like, how can we push their boundaries?
To bring them into mainstream.
How can we put them into PR opportunities? I think brands are doing this a lot more as well, especially in the entertainment space. How do we get influencers into press junkets, for example? And we can push the boundaries of influencer marketing by doing that. And we can also push the influencers out of their comfort zone by doing that. And that means that in the long run, they're going to have a lot more to do, and they're going to have a lot more to fall back on if anything happens.
Even then, I'm thinking, well, actually put a content creator in a junket, because an influencer probably wouldn't be media trained or able to fix a camera.
But I've put a lot of influencers, but what I would classify as influencers, into junkets. And do you know what? They are a breath of fresh air for these talent, because these
casts... It shakes up the format. It's not just the same old question and answer. It's more of a we do a challenge together? Or
Yes.
can we do a game together?
Yes.
Yeah.
And they come in with such high energy, and they just build the cast up, and the cast are like, great. And then there was kind of one press junket that I did, and in between everyone coming in and out, the guy was like, oh, who are these influencers? I need to look them up, and had never seen them before in his life, which is fine, that's acceptable, but was so interested in what we were doing.
So had a memorable experience.
Yes.
Influencer.
Yeah, exactly.
Versus a normal journalist interview. I feel like we could talk about influencer versus content creator versus what the hell are we calling this industry now?
Yeah.
But we did start talking about creator houses. So FaZe Clan, Hype House, Team 10. You've probably heard all of these names. Byte House, Wave House.
Yes.
Probably heard all of these names over the past, I'd say probably 5 years, 5-6 years. I think Team 10 was probably in its heyday when Jake and Logan Paul were still part of it, probably like 2018. What are they? What is a content house?
Such a good question. I don't think I don't think anyone can explain this because it's very complicated. But from my experience, a content creator house is basically putting creators into a house. They live there. Depending on, what you decide to do, it could be they live there for 3 months, or they live there until they're told to leave, or they do 5 days a week. But it's very much wake up, create content, help each other out with content, film their own content, post that on social channels, and eat, go to sleep, repeat, basically. And it's like us.
It's like Big Brother.
It is basically Big Brother. That's a good kind of analogy, except we're not recording them the whole time, even though we kind of are, but it's very structured in the day. But it's very much just a space to build a community, build a team, a bit like, let's take the Beta Squad, for example, when they all live together, build that real kind of team. What am I trying to say? Yeah, and you build a good community from it as well, because if we look at the likes of, let's say, take Friends, for example, on the TV, everybody has their favorite character, right? And they're all a group of friends, and we're obsessed with watching their life as it is. That's the same for a creator house. You're putting a group of friends into a house, and you may have your own favorite creator or your own favorite influencer in there, and you're just obsessed with watching their life. And I think that's what it kind of is. It's taking that element of, let's say, like Gossip Girl, Friends, but making it in the social digital era.
It feels so, and we were talking about this before we started recording. Obviously, the whole principle of influence marketing is that it feels authentic.
Yes.
So you worked behind the scenes on Wave House.
Yes.
And that was around 2021?
2020, actually, yeah. So
peak lockdown.
Yes.
People were looking for new ways to be entertained.
Yes.
Did it land as well in the UK market versus, because in the US, I think they're far more accustomed to it. We're talking about collab channels on YouTube, which were around like 8 years ago, where they shared houses and they made content. Did it land as well in the UK versus what they like in the US?
I think for the UK market, it landed well. In the US markets, for example, not so much.
Right.
But the longevity of it did not work. And maybe that's because we trialed it in the UK market, or we trialed it too early.
Okay.
Because I think, we did the Wave House when it was about September time 2020. I would say TikTok fully blew up as a platform in March 2020. So brands were not spending. The only real people that were spending on the platform were apps and music clients.
Yeah.
And then that means that you can't monetize this channel, because even the whole TikTok creator fund wasn't a thing until like 2 months we were into the Wave House. So I think it was too early for its time, but also it was working in the US. So why couldn't we do it in the UK? So it was a very questionable thing. I don't think the UK was as ready for it as we expected, and I don't think the UK brands were spending on it as we expected, and that's why it didn't work kind of long term, and it only kind of ran for 6 months. So I think for the UK, the audience loved it, but the brand side and the monetization of it didn't work.
Not so much. So can you talk us through what was your role there, and like what was the day-to-day like?
Yes.
And you said some of them live there permanently, some are there for like 5 days a week. Were there contracts in place? Like, can we just get into the detail of that?
Yeah.
'Cause I find it so alien. I'm really interested in it.
Yeah, so going back to the start, I was approached by my manager at the time and said, creators have come to us and they've come with this concept of a house.
Right.
It's been done in the US. They're all friends. They've come to us and said, we want to do this. So my manager said to me, do you want to take it on? And I was 23 at the time. I was like, I will do anything. I will throw myself into anything. I will take any challenge on. So I was like, yes, sure, I'll do it. Not knowing that we were going to be living there full time. And when I say we,
You were living
I was living there as well.
Wow.
So 3 months of my life, I lived with 6 creators in that house. We were originally going to live there fully. It got to the point where it was very hard to differentiate work and life. So we decided to go home at weekends just to
Switch off.
differentiate that. Yes.
So you lived there with these creators.
Yes.
And your role was in charge of helping them ideate content and shoot it.
Yes. So ideation, production, I was behind all the iPhone clips. They were teaching me the transitions. I have them like literally in my back pocket now. I'm great at doing transitions. I would do their food shopping. I would organize their PT. I would organize their chef coming. I would organize every single prop that came to the house. And when I say props, I mean we had roller coasters in the background.
The Mario Kart.
Yeah.
I was like, this is next level.
We had Mario Kart, we had snakes coming to the house, we had an ice rink in the back garden, we had roller coasters there. Like, it was crazy. And I had never done production before, and I was doing a production job on a very low salary at the time. And I was just finding my way. I had no help. There was the influencers, and they were turning up. They were doing their job. They were being in the content. They were coming up with ideas with me as well. But I was by myself doing all the fishing of how do I find a roller coaster in the middle of nowhere where this house is.
All of this is just so crazy. I didn't expect to get... Okay, so you lived in the house.
Yeah.
You are essentially a PA to them all.
Basically a mum.
Production manager, and then also creative strategy as well.
Yes.
How did you feel?
At the time, I just thought it was my job, and I thought it was normal. Looking back on it now, it was not normal. I was getting up at 7 o'clock in the morning, working before the influencers got up, and I was working until 10 o'clock at night. There was one night I waited up until 2 o'clock in the morning because a massive Christmas tree was being put up, and the guys were late and they were taking forever to put it up. And it was just, I was just going to bed stressing. I was dreaming about all the different videos we were doing and dreaming about if I was going to execute them because I hadn't got a reindeer for Christmas. But that is not normal. And I think that's where, you know, when you're 23 years old and you're quite new to an industry at that time, you do what you've got to do and you're passionate about your job, but you don't realize where you're being overutilized and where you're kind of being taken advantage of.
I feel like it would be useful explaining that the house was run by an agency.
Yes, it was run by an agency.
But you were approached by a group of friends
yes.
who were influencers.
Yeah.
To execute.
Yeah. So
were they paid to be in the house?
No, so we managed 2 of the influencers already. So we had a talent management side of the agency.
Right.
And then they came to us with their friends and said, we've got this idea. Would you be able to help us execute it? It was so new, we didn't know what we were doing. But the point was that we wanted to then get brand deals out of that. Right. And therefore they would get a share of that money.
Okay.
So that was the point. So we footed all the money for everything, the house, the production, everything like that.
And were there brand deals?
There were brand deals, but there weren't a lot.
Do you know how much was put into this house, this whole project?
I couldn't tell you exactly, but I could tell you it was probably 6 figures.
Wow. So it's a big investment.
So if you look at the house itself, it was massive.
It was a mansion.
Yes.
It was enormous.
We had acres of land. We like we utilized that acres of land, but there was a swimming pool, there was a sauna, there was a gym, there was a PT and a chef coming. Like there was a lot of money invested into this. And I just think it was too soon.
It's crazy. This is actually crazy to me. I feel like in that time, so if we're looking at 2020, 2021, because it was the tail end of 2020, you said, that's when TikTok had really democratized who could be an influencer. And the reason it was succeeding is because anyone could pick up a phone and make content.
Yes.
So for me as a viewer, and I guess it's not something that would appeal to me, I'm struggling to contend with the idea of something so cultivated and like produced on platform where you normally have, I think the appeal of content creators for me is that they're like me, they're like you, and so to see this experience, it's fascinating.
Yeah.
And I did see some of the sentiment on the comments was not so positive. So how did you navigate that, and what was the impact on the influencers? Because obviously that's quite a lot of that's quite a lot to take on.
I think, you know, there was a massive impact on the influencers, but there was a massive impact on us as a group. And I think, you know, the influencers, they fronted it, they were the faces of it. But I think a lot of people don't realize I was there as well, and I was experiencing
so much behind the scenes.
Yeah, I was experiencing everything they were experiencing. I think the major thing for us was we were getting millions of views. So
were they all organic, or was there any paid?
All organic. So our first big video was 60 million views it hit. And after that, it was like, how are we going to continue this and how are we going to top it? And we were, from like my managers and from the agency, we were getting pressure to be like, when is the next 1 million? If you don't hit 1 million at least, then it's a bad video. 1 million is amazing to be getting. 1 million views
especially
is amazing.
For an account that's under 3 months old.
Yes. So it was always, how are we going to top it? How are we going to get better? And we felt like we needed that high production value to get better. It did take a toll on every single person in that house. And I tried to do my best to think about how we could, you know, go against those things and how we could really stabilize their mental health. We took on meditation at the time. I know like people might be saying, oh, meditation, but you know, it was a time for us to take a break, and we did that once a week, to take a break, all of us at the same time, and just kind of try not to think about anything. And it still just got to the point, I mean, we had multiple breakdowns. I had 3 mental breakdowns in 3 months. It was a real testing time for all of us. And I think we all learned a lot about ourselves personally from that experience. But I personally would never put myself in that situation again.
I think that's most of the people we've spoken to so far on the impact of influencer, being an influencer rather, have spoken about, you know, creator burnout is a real thing that people face.
Yeah.
So you've definitely touched on that. It was interesting to see how the following on TikTok did not translate to YouTube and Instagram in the same way. I feel like that experience probably taught you a lot about cross-platform strategies and building those channels out. What do you think the reason why was the content you were putting on the other channels distinctly different, or was it the same content just being repurposed?
So it was different. Like on Instagram, what we would put is we would put more kind of behind the scenes photos on the feed, and we weren't really utilizing reels that much. So we weren't like reposting the content onto reels, just because I don't think it would translate on Instagram. I think as you said, what we were doing was so high production value, and it seemed very like unattainable at the time for like the audience to watch. I don't think it would have worked to put it on Instagram. And we were trying to make Instagram more of a like behind the scenes content. YouTube, we were trying to make more of a documentary of like talking about the things like mental health and how it's impacted the influencers and what goes into everything we're doing. And it's not just a video that gets put out on TikTok. There's so much more behind it. And we were trying to tell that story, but I think we were really coming from a TikTok space. The agency I was at was a TikTok agency. I'd learned a lot about TikTok in my time I'd been there, and the creators some of them were more YouTube and some were TikTok, but the real kind of people that had the impact on the content were TikTok first. So I think we all just had these TikTok minds and we didn't know how to translate that. We had a production company come to us to help us try and grow the YouTube side of things and really utilize like the BTS and what goes into everything, or gamify it a little bit like Beta Squad or Sidemen, try and do more challenges like that, but it just wasn't translating as well.
Interesting.
And I honestly can't tell you why. I know you asked me why, but I can't tell you why. And I think it's because we did have these TikTok heads. We were all just thinking TikTok, TikTok, TikTok. And that's where content houses really worked at the time, was TikTok.
Yeah. I feel like it's kind of, my next question was around, I think TikTok itself, but also content houses are often associated with short-term success.
Yeah.
Are those influencers that were in the content wave house, are they still creating content? Are you still in touch? What's their situation now?
They are creating content. They're all doing really well. I can't say any of them, have dipped off. They're all amazing and they've all built their own personal brands. The Wave House was completely separate to their personal brands. And I think that's why they've still maintained their careers the way they have. And they've done it really, really well. I see their content and they're doing amazingly. They've even dabbled in different markets like music or not just influencer marketing. So it's really nice to see. I don't talk to any of them. I do see some of them at events and always we don't have any bad blood, but I think we went through so much together that sometimes you need to separate yourself from the people that you go through so much with, because it might bring back triggers or trauma. You don't know what's going to happen. But there was for me personally, it was more like you need to step away just to find yourself, take a breath and realize what you actually personally want in life and in your career.
That makes sense. I feel like the next best question is, do you think we'll see more content houses?
So I think there's some brands that are taking aspects of content houses and doing it really, really well. So
that squad mentality, I think,
yes,
is like super important. So many, Beta Squad, but so many other groups of influencers where I think that's what audiences look to them for. They want to feel part of that. Certainly when we've worked with creators like that. So it's more about how can we feel part of this squad. So I feel like you're right. I think I guess what the content house did, and correct if I'm wrong, I feel like what it did is put it all under a microscope and really intensify it. And actually the winning things there are squad mentality, camaraderie, coming together as friends and having a fun time. But unfortunately, because you condensed it all, not you, but I mean the situation condensed it down into a 3-month period. God, that's intense. So it loses that the appeal. And I guess to my point earlier around authenticity, I do not doubt that the talent and the influencers had fun making content with one another.
Yes.
Which was authentic, and that joy was authentic. But I guess what was missing for me in a content house is always that narrative, or like how do we get to point B? Like, what's the journey? So I feel like they're probably like yourself, and they all learned from that experience. They actually, there's a bigger story to tell here, and we can take those winning tropes and winning themes and lace it through what we do anyway.
And they all create content like as a squad and as a friendship group anyway. Like they still go like on holidays and stuff together. So they've still got that squad mentality. But I think it just, as you say, is quite high intensity when you're in that situation. So that's why it didn't work. But I think I've seen like brands like, let's take Jack Wills, for example, and they're taking the idea of a content house, but they're doing it in little kind of bursts. So they do like their ski trips away and they do all of this, which is great for them to get the content they want to get, build that kind of squad mentality. Quite a few of those influencers they utilize quite a lot, but they're not making it really intense because it's not 3 months, it's a week, and it's a nice time away with your friends, and you're creating a few TikToks in between.
Kind of think of like Foot Asylum lockdown.
Yes, yeah.
So it takes that whole, let's hit the mic, it takes that whole creating content together, but puts a nice spin, a fun spin on it. And then makes it work. I feel like content houses probably in America are definitely here to stay. I wonder if we'll see any more in the UK. But I think what we definitely love is I like watching influencers who are friends, or always like watching content creators that are friends. And sometimes they make content together, sometimes they don't.
And you can always have that discussion with your mates. Like if you watch, for example, the Beta Squad, if you watch them, I'll have conversations with me like, well, who's your favourite Beta Squad member? Or who do you feel like you relate to most? And that's the thing I think is quite nice about squads, is you can be like, oh, in my friendship group, I'm like the Chunks or whatever, whereas you're like the AJ Shabil. Like it's quite nice to look at a squad, look at your friendship group and be like, and be like, oh, we're like that. Or that's quite normal to be pissing about together. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I agree. My final question before we go into some quick fire questions, just to get your thoughts. What's next in influencer marketing this year?
I think we're seeing a lot of podcasts, but I think we're also seeing, I think we're going to see a boom in influencers creating their own brands. So we've got like Prime, we've got Grace Beverly, we've got
Ipsy by Michelle Fan, we've got so many.
Yeah, we've got so many, but I think it's going to boom this year. Podcast is really booming, but I also feel overwhelmed by podcast as a listener, because I look at it and I think, what influencer podcast do I want to listen to? And then I just stick to one because I'm so overwhelmed by how much there is on the platform from an influencer perspective.
Do you think it's the same as, I think in 2014, 15, we saw loads of influencers releasing books?
Yes.
And then it got quite saturated.
Yes.
Do you think we're going to start whittling out, like you just said, I look at the landscape now and there's so many podcasts to listen to, like this one. And it's hard to make that decision of what to get to.
Yeah.
But I guess the high quality ones will live on.
Yeah.
And then we'll whittle out the ones that we're not so interested in.
And I think I've spoken to podcast studios. I speak to a lot of podcast productions as well in the influencer space, and I think it's becoming more visual in the podcast space as well. So a lot of the audience, or Gen Z generation to millennial generation, they want to watch it. So they want to watch it on their TV, on YouTube, and watch people having a discussion.
And pop it in the background.
Which is great. I mean, I personally listen to it in the gym, which apparently makes me a millennial, that I found out the other day, when I'm actually a Gen Z. But
I'm a millennial, so actually I feel like I'm a zillennial. I mean, I don't know if you guys agree.
But yeah, it's definitely oversaturated, but I think it's going more visual now in the podcast space.
Totally
agree. But then I think we're gonna see a lot more influencers coming out with their own brands and promoting them that way. Anything else? I think UGC is becoming maybe a bit too scripted, and we're gonna see
it's quite done, doesn't it?
Yeah, and we're gonna see a lot more customer generated content. That was where UGC started.
I think that's an interesting one. I agree with you on that point, because I think UGC also doesn't really, UGC creators don't really seem to exist outside of TikTok as well.
Yes.
Because it's so catered for like spark boosting.
Yeah, but then I we utilize them quite a lot on Instagram paid ads as well.
True.
So, but I don't see it on people's Instagram feeds. But I think that's becoming way too structured now, and it's becoming quite influencer marketing, and the customers are not relating to it again. Yeah, so I think we're going to go back to that customer generated content again.
I like that. Thank you for taking us through content houses. It has kind of blown my mind. Yeah. Would I live with a group of influencers for 3 months? Absolutely not. But you did it, and I don't have to. But thank you for sharing that, because I think it was a really interesting story for people to listen to, and particularly when the focus on influencer, like I'm sure you've done for the past several years since leaving that role, is focusing on like, what is that authenticity piece, influencer versus creator.
Yeah.
We have got some quick fire questions.
Okay.
These are about influencer, but also not. So feel free to just answer as we go. Duets or Stitch?
Oh, that's really hard. Stitch.
Viral challenges or original content?
Original content.
Day in the life vlogs or themed content days?
Themed content days.
Collaborate with other influencers or solo vids?
Collaborate with other influencers.
What's your favourite collaboration that you've seen?
Oh, you're really putting me on the spot. I've said this so much, but I am a Beta Squad girly. Like, I as we've said, I love the squad vibe, and I love seeing those friendships. Yeah. Shits and Gigs, for example, BTS podcast, I love them. They're very up and coming. Like, I love the friendship group dynamics, and that's really what I love. Squad. Yeah.
Fine. Filters or natural beauty?
Natural.
A favourite TikTok trend you've taken part in?
Do I take part in any TikTok trends?
Have you ever done something with mates?
Oh, I do. I have an account for my dog. I'm one
Wow.
of those people.
What dog do you have?
It's a little toy poodle.
Ah,
Yeah,
adorable.
yeah. So I do like a lot of trending videos for her. So she has a little boyfriend, and so I do trending videos with her and her boyfriend.
Does she have loads of followers?
No.
Oh, still time.
Yeah.
Google search or TikTok search?
TikTok search.
Do you ever
100%.
Google search anything? Or-
No. Anything I want to find, I can find on
You're
TikTok.
Gen Z.
Yeah.
You're
So
fully Gen
if I
Z.
want like a restaurant in Soho, TikTok. If I want to know where to go on a girls' night out, TikTok.
Really?
If I want a cheap brunch, TikTok.
Wow.
Yeah.
I couldn't.
Yeah.
I have done, but I won't.
It's so easy. I can find everything on there.
Comedy sketches or heartfelt content?
Heartfelt.
TikTok Shop?
Yes, love it.
Do you?
Yes.
Have you bought a lot on TikTok Shop?
I've bought a lot on TikTok Shop and I've made money on TikTok Shop.
Interesting. 'Cause
Yes.
You make content as well.
Yeah. No, it's actually really good. It's a really good side hustle. Would recommend for anyone to 100% do it.
I've seen a lot of My Protein on.
Yes.
on
Yeah,
TikTok.
they're
Everyone's
on there a
talking
lot.
about the protein powders.
Yeah.
All the time.
And Free Solar on there a lot.
Rosemary oil.
Rosemary. I just got a rosemary oil because I've got these little baby hairs that I need growing out. So yeah.
Report back in like 2
Yeah.
months. Favorite TikTok feature: green screen or voice effects?
Voice effects because I hate my voice.
Same. I don't know why I'm doing a podcast. Reaction videos. Yes or no?
Yes.
Guilty pleasure trend. ASMR.
Oh, the rug cleaning.
Oh, I love that. I was about to say, I love when they do cow hooves.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Have you seen that?
No.
Farriers, and they clean horseshoes or cow hooves.
Oh.
One TikTok feature you wish existed.
That's hard because I said I hate my voice and I like the voice effect thing. Oh, I tried to post photos the other day,
Okay.
replying to a comment from my video, and they don't do that. So
Interesting.
you can't post videos; it makes it into a video. You can't post photos; it makes it into a video.
Ah.
So that's what they need to add.
If anyone from TikTok is listening,
Yeah.
get your act together.
Yeah.
Vicky has an idea. Please incorporate it.
You can call me anytime.
That's all the questions. Thank you for joining us for the podcast today. I
Thank
feel like
you.
we've gone on a whistle-stop tour of not only your experience, but also how things have really changed in
Yes.
4 years, particularly with a focus on TikTok.
Yeah.
As you said, you are very Gen Z. But I'm really interested to see, will we see more content houses? Won't we? Probably not in the UK, I don't think. But
Yeah.
maybe I'm wrong. But you're right, like Beta Squad are really dominating and the Sidemen are really dominating that squad mentality space on YouTube, on TikTok. Perhaps we'll see you on YouTube sometime soon if you move over from TikTok.
Oh, I don't think so.
No.
I told you I hate my
I
voice.
hate your voice.
I can't do those daily vlogs. It's not going to work
Hi,
for
guys.
me. No.
Okay.
No.
No podcast from Vicky.
No.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of the What They Said podcast, powered by Pretty Green. We've had a great time with Vicky, diving into all things TikTok, content houses, which has truly blown my mind, and the rise of squad mentality and how audiences love to feel a part of a friendship group, whether that's Beta Squad or the Sidemen. Join us next week where we'll talk even more about the creator economy and all the questions you didn't ask. And please make sure you give this podcast a like or a follow wherever you're watching along. Please comment down below any themes you'd like us to chat through. And you can find Vicky on anywhere on the screen at the moment if you're watching along, but also we'll link Vicky's LinkedIn below. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week.